They laughed. My own parents. My mom covered her mouth like I'd just told some ridiculous joke. My dad shook his head with that smug little smirk he always got when he thought he was right about something. $10, he said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. I didn't say a word. I just sat there, frozen. My cheeks were burning and my palms were shaking. The lawyer had just read my name from the will. That was it. To Dana Harper, $10. No explanation, no apology, just $10. The silence in the room wasn't even surprising. It was the laughter that followed. Low, cruel chuckles from people who had always treated me like I didn't belong. But then Mr. Whitaker, the family attorney, cleared his throat. Actually, he said, adjusting his glasses, there's a private letter addressed solely to Dana. The room went dead quiet. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in my parents' eyes. They had no clue what was coming. Neither did I. I was born into a family where your path was mapped out before you could walk. The Harpers didn't just have money. We had legacy. My grandfather, Walter Harper, built a manufacturing empire from scratch. My parents took it over like they were royalty. Everything had a rule. From how we wrapped our Christmas gifts to what we wore to brunch, I never fit into the mold. While my brother Lucas was reciting business terminology before he hit puberty, I was the kid in the corner at family gatherings, sketching faces no one saw. My mother called my art cute distractions. My father? He didn't even glance at it. At 13, I saved up enough money to buy a second-hand camera from a pawn shop. I'd disappear on weekends to photograph rusted fences, broken windows, kids doing tricks on skateboards, things that were real, raw, things that weren't curated like my family. I remember showing my mom a black and white photo I was proud of once. She blinked, took a breath, and said, "You look tired. Maybe less time outside." By high school, the distance between us wasn't just emotional, it was structural. Lucas was being mentored by board members and finance advisors. I was being ignored. I once overheard my dad say, after some board meeting, "She needs to wake up. Dreams don't pay for legacy. She's still young." My mother said, not even trying to sound convincing, "She'll come around." But I didn't. Instead, I secretly applied to art school. When my acceptance letter arrived, I told them over dinner, "You want to study photographs?" My dad asked, like I'd announced I wanted to major in interpretive dance. "That's not a profession, Dana. That's a hobby." And then came the sentence that stuck with me. The one I'll never unhear. "You're wasting your inheritance," my mom said. 2 months later, I moved out. I scraped by with scholarships, shooting portraits for local bands, weddings, anything I could land. I taught myself editing on a laptop with a flickering screen. I worked night shifts at a coffee shop just to afford rent and food. I wasn't trying to be famous. I just needed to make something that was mine. The only person who never judged me was my grandfather. He never said much, but every time I saw him, he'd ask, "You still taking pictures?" And he'd smile. Just a flicker, but it was real. I thought maybe he saw something in me. Maybe. When he died, I didn't expect a huge inheritance. He was private, old school. He didn't play favorites, but I hoped for something. A photo, a letter, a book he thought I might like. Something that said, "You mattered to me." So when the lawyer said, "To Dana Harper, $10, and the room laughed, it wasn't the money that crushed me. It was the message that I was worth less than a brunch bill, that I was invisible. But maybe that wasn't what he meant. Maybe it was a door, a code, a test. Because then Mr. Whittaker cleared his throat and said, "There was a private letter. Just for me?" The last time I saw my grandfather was 3 weeks before he died. It wasn't a planned visit. I just finished a photo shoot and somehow found myself standing outside his brownstone. We weren't a drop-by kind of family. You scheduled appointments with relatives the way you did with doctors, but something pulled me there. Maybe instinct. He opened the door himself, looked thinner, slower, but his eyes sharp as ever. "Well," he said with a half-smile, "a Harper who actually knocks." He didn't ask why I was there. Just welcomed me in. The house smelled like cedar and old books. Like time had decided to sit and stay a while. We sat in his study. No one talked about the company. Instead, he asked about my photography. "What are you working on?" I hesitated. "A series called Invisible Homes. I've been shooting abandoned houses in neighborhoods no one talks about." He looked at me. Really looked. "What are you trying to say with them?" "That people matter," I said, "even if the world forgets them." He nodded once. "That's dangerous work." "Why?" "Because you're telling the truth. And truth costs more than people think." We sat in silence after that. No small talk, no phones. It was the most present I'd ever felt with someone in my family. When I got up to leave, he followed me to the door and pulled open a drawer by the entryway. He handed me an old film camera. It was worn, the leather strap faded, corners chipped. "This was mine," he said. "Before I built the company, I carried it everywhere." I stared at him. "I didn't know you took pictures." I stopped. He said quietly, "Some dreams don't survive the weight of inheritance." Then he met my eyes. Really met them. "Don't let them take your eye, Dana. That's your gift and your rebellion." It was the last thing he ever said to me. I left his house, clutching that old camera, like it held the answers to a future I hadn't figured out yet. Back then, I thought he was warning me about business. Turns out he was warning me about family. The will reading took place in a law office, straight out of a power fantasy. Glass walls, polished marble floors. A receptionist who whispered into her headset, like everything she said was a secret. I wore my best black dress, the one I saved for gallery openings and funerals. I even straightened my hair, mostly to avoid my mother's usual comments about looking unrefined. When I walked into the conference room, the temperature dropped. My parents were already there, seated near the head of the table, like they were chairing a board meeting. Lucas gave me a polite, hollow nod. My mother didn't look up. My father raised one eyebrow, the universal Harper signal for, "Why are you even here?" The room filled up fast. Cousins, aunts, uncles, in-laws I hadn't seen in years. Everyone smelled like money and ambition. The air felt tight, like the walls were listening. At precisely 10 Gals a.m., Mr. Whittaker entered, clutching a folder, thick enough to choke a printer. He nodded once and sat. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "We're here to read and execute the last will and testament of Walter H. Harper." He started with the obvious. A vacation home in Vermont to Aunt Lydia. Stocks to a few cousins. My grandfather's antique gun collection. Lucas, of course. My mother received a vintage necklace passed down through the women of the family. My father got real estate assets and a handwritten letter I couldn't see from where I was sitting. I just sat there, hands clasped in my lap, squeezing my fingers so tight my knuckles ached. And then Whitaker's gaze shifted. "To Dana Harper," he said, voice steady, measured. My stomach clenched. "Walter leaves the sum of $10. That was it. The words hung in the air for a beat. Then came the laughter. My father let out a sharp huff of air, shaking his head like he'd just watched a toddler fall off a bike. "Guess that's what rebellion gets you," he muttered, not even trying to hide it. My mother? She laughed, full on. A cousin leaned toward me and whispered, "Must have been one hell of a photograph." I didn't react. I refused to give them the satisfaction. I nodded once. Understood. It wasn't the money. It was what it said about how they saw me. Like I was nothing but a mistake they tolerated. I was ready to stand, leave, walk out of their lives entirely. But then Mr. Whitaker cleared his throat again. "There is one more item," he said, his voice cutting clean through the noise. And just like that, the room snapped to attention. Whitaker looked directly at me. "There is a private addendum," he said, "meant only for Dana." You could feel the shift in the air. My father's eyebrows pulled together. "What do you mean, private?" My mother adjusted in her seat. She already got what she was due. Mr. Whitaker didn't flinch. "Mr. Harper left a sealed envelope in my custody. It contains instructions and is to be read in private." He turned to me. "Dana, would you join me in the adjoining office?" The room buzzed like a kicked beehive. Murmurs, suspicion, everyone leaning in, whispering under their breath. My parents didn't even bother hiding their irritation. Lucas looked like someone had given him a math problem with no solution. I stood, slow and careful, willing my legs not to shake. I didn't make eye contact with anyone as I followed Mr. Whitaker into a side room. Every stair trailed behind me. The door shut with a soft click. The smaller office felt colder, quieter, like it was sealed off from all the noise of the world. There it was, sitting on the desk. A thick envelope, cream-colored, my name written across the front in neat, deliberate cursive. I knew that handwriting. "My grandfather's. For you," Whitaker said gently. I picked it up. It felt heavier than it should have. "Did you read it?" I asked. He shook his head. "I was instructed not to. But I was told to give you as much time as you need." I nodded. My throat was dry. He left the room, closing the door behind him. I sat, ran my fingers over the wax seal, embossed with a tiny symbol, a camera. I exhaled, and then carefully I opened it. Inside were several handwritten pages. The first line stopped me cold. "My dearest Dana," he apologized for the scene, said he knew it hurt, and that it was supposed to. "I needed them to show you who they really are when they thought you had nothing." I kept reading. Each word pulled the ground out from under me. The $10 inheritance was a smokescreen, a setup, a test. He'd been planning this for months. I was the sole beneficiary of the Harper Foundation. Not the board, not Lucas, not my parents. Me. Included in the inheritance, a private art gallery, a penthouse studio, and wait for it, 70% ownership of the Harper Creative Trust, which, according to the documents enclosed, had more value than everything else the rest of the family was fighting over combined. But then came the line that broke me open. They laughed, Dana, but they laughed too soon. I read the letter 3 times, unable to believe it. My grandfather had left me not just money, not even just control. He left me freedom. He transferred the core of the Harper legacy into my hands, quietly, deliberately, so the rest of the family couldn't claw it away. And then the conditions. Not rules, not ultimatums, terms. He didn't want me to become a CEO. He didn't want me to run board meetings or wear power suits. He wanted me to see. You have an eye, Dana, he wrote. That's rarer than any stock I ever owned. The trust was mine to shape, but only if I promised not to become like them. I laughed, through tears. In the bottom of the envelope was a small black box. Inside, a single brass key on a thin leather cord. Underneath, a note. Beacon Street, top floor. Your new studio. Your real inheritance. I sat there, stunned. All this time, I thought I was an afterthought. But I wasn't. He had seen me all along, and he'd believed in me more than anyone else ever had. When I walked back into the conference room, everything looked the same. My parents were still smiling, still smug. My father was in the middle of a comment. She'll probably frame that check. And laughter followed like a bad punchline. I slid back into my seat at the end of the table, calm, silent. Lucas gave me a look. Everything okay? Just needed a moment, I said smoothly. And then I watched them. Really watched. The way my mom played with her necklace. The way my dad leaned back in his chair like he'd won. The way Lucas scrolled his phone like none of this mattered anymore. My grandfather had been right. You needed to see them as they are when they think you have nothing. I saw them, clearly. This was the test. And now it was time to decide what I was going to do with the truth. In the days that followed the reading of the will, I didn't say a word. Not to my parents. Not to Lucas. Not to any of the vultures circling our family name, hoping to catch wind of scandal or inheritance. I didn't return the passive-aggressive text from my mother. Hope you're doing okay. Let us know if you need help cashing that check. I ignored the group message where Lucas dropped a screenshot of an article about the 10 most common reasons trust funds go to waste, followed by a winking emoji. Instead, I called Mr. Whitaker. And we got to work. The first thing I did was visit the address on the note. Beacon Street, top floor. The building was tucked between a row of older brownstones, unassuming from the outside, but quietly beautiful. The doorman greeted me by name before I even introduced myself. He handed me a sleek key card and said, "Welcome home, Miss Harper." I rode the elevator to the top, and when the doors opened, I stepped into sunlight. Floor-to-ceiling windows lined the far wall. Hardwood floors, white walls, clean, minimalist. It wasn't just a studio. It was a gallery, a sanctuary, and a home all in one. In the far corner was a dark wooden cabinet. Inside it, my photographs, all of them, carefully preserved, mounted, labeled, images I thought I had sold years ago. Photos I barely remembered printing. He'd bought them, all of them, under aliases, through brokers, quietly collecting, archiving, believing. There was a small plaque mounted near the cabinet. Harper Light Studio. That's what he'd named it. It was like he had built a parallel life. One where he had pursued his own creative instincts instead of building factories. One where I wasn't just his granddaughter. I was his mirror. He had made space for me long before I even knew I'd need it. And now the question wasn't, what did I receive? It was, what was I going to do with it? I thought about revenge, briefly. I imagined calling a family meeting and sliding the documents across the table, watching the color drain from their faces as they realized I was holding the true heart of the Harper legacy. I imagined the headlines, the social posts, the interviews, but then I remembered the letter. Lead with your vision, not your anger. Show them what they refuse to see. So instead, I chose something else. I chose art. I chose a debut. 6 weeks later, the invitations went out. Elegant. Minimal. Ivory cardstock. The Harper family crest on one side. A single embossed line on the other. The Harper Light Studio presents The Inheritance of Fission, a debut gallery event celebrating unseen perspectives. It wasn't just a launch, it was a message. The event was by invitation only. Critics, curators, journalists, donors, and yes, my family. I sent their invitations by certified mail. Lucas RSVP'd immediately. I'm sure he assumed it would be a good networking opportunity. My mother texted, "Interesting name, we'll see." My father, of course, said nothing. But I heard through Lucas that they were planning to attend. Out of curiosity or ego or suspicion. Perfect. Opening night arrived. The gallery glowed. Every light was deliberate, every photo carefully curated. The early images, my teenage shots of alleyways and fences, lined the entry hallway. In the next room, a progression. Abandoned storefronts, crumbling walls, forgotten spaces. People with tired eyes and stubborn hope. The story of my lens growing up in a family that refused to see me. And then, at the very center of the studio, was the final exhibit. A single-frame check, mounted behind crystal-clear glass, $10, signed and dated from the estate of Walter H. Harper. Beneath it, the placard read, "Gifted to Dana Harper at the reading of Walter Harper's will. Value. Priceless." And then in smaller type, "Sometimes the smallest inheritance is the greatest test." I timed their arrival down to the minute. They walked in just as a local art critic was delivering opening remarks, describing my work as an evocative legacy of quiet defiance. People clapped, cameras flashed. My mother walked in first, wearing a pearl necklace and a strained smile. Lucas followed, scanning the room like he was checking for brand partnerships. My father came last, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. They looked around, and I could feel their confusion before they said a single word. Lucas broke the silence first. "This is all yours?" he asked, nodding toward a wall of portraits. "Yes," I said. He furrowed his brow. "Since when do you run this place?" I smiled. "Since always." My mother stepped closer. This is quite ambitious, she said, her voice brittle with control. Did someone sponsor it? No sponsors, I replied, tone calm. Just one believer. My father's jaw twitched. Where did you get the money for all this? He asked, almost casually. I tilted my head. That's not really the question you want to ask, is it? Before he could reply, Mr. Whitaker appeared beside me. He wore a dark suit and a rare smile. Shall we? He asked. I nodded. We stepped up onto a small platform near the $10 exhibit. The crowd quieted instantly. Ladies and gentlemen, Whitaker began, thank you for joining us at Harper Light Studio, founded by and dedicated to the artistic vision of Dana Harper. Gasps. People glanced toward me. Cameras lifted. He continued. It's time we share a part of the story that, until now, has remained private. As the executor of Walter Harper's estate, I'm honored to announce that Dana Harper is the sole beneficiary of the Harper Creative Trust. The room exploded into murmurs. My mother's face went pale. Lucas blinked like he'd just been slapped with math again. My father's mouth opened slightly, then snapped shut. Whitaker continued. Mr. Harper believed legacy should follow merit, not lineage. Dana's commitment to truth, her courage, and her artistry earned his full support. Not just emotionally, but structurally, financially, strategically. He raised a glass. To Dana Harper, the real heir, thunderous applause. But I didn't look at the crowd. I looked at them. My mother stood frozen, her lips tight. My father's fists clenched at his sides. Lucas stared at me like I was someone he didn't recognize. I stepped down from the platform and walked toward them. Why didn't you tell us? My mother hissed under her breath. I kept my voice even. Because you never asked what I was building. You only asked why I didn't fall in line. We're still your family, she said. And yet you laughed, I said quietly, when I was humiliated. My father gestured around the room, his voice low and angry. This was all part of some setup, a plan? No, I said, looking him dead in the eyes. It was a mirror. You just didn't like what it showed. They didn't respond, because what could they say? I left them standing there and walked back into the crowd, into conversations and compliments, into curiosity, into recognition, and for the first time, I wasn't the forgotten Harper. I was the one who had inherited the future. I didn't go home that night. After the gallery emptied and the last glass of champagne was poured, I stayed at the penthouse my grandfather had left me. I walked barefoot across the hardwood floors of the studio, the city glowing beneath the windows like a second sky. The silence felt reverent. On the long wooden table near the windows sat the framed $10 check from the exhibit. Beside it, a photograph I had taken years ago. My grandfather staring out a train window, watching the world pass him by. I thought no one had noticed him in that moment. But I had, and now I realized he had noticed me all along. He hadn't given me that inheritance to save me. He gave it to free me. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. Quietly, purposefully. I finalized the paperwork with Mr. Whitaker. We transferred ownership of the Harper Creative Trust and the Harper Light Studio under my name. I brought in advisors, ones my grandfather had selected. People who understood creative investments, legacy building, and impact over image. And I made a plan. The first thing I did was expand the studio. I took the 2 floors below the gallery and converted them into live work residencies for young artists from underserved communities. Each space came with a bedroom, shared kitchen, studio lighting, editing software, and the one thing most of us never get: time. Time to create, time to think, time to believe they were worth investing in. The first group of residents arrived cautiously, like they were waiting to be told it was all a mistake. But when I handed them the keys and said, "You belong here," something shifted. One of them, a girl barely 20, stood in front of her new darkroom and whispered, "No one's ever said that to me before." That's when I knew I was doing the right thing. The Harper Creative Trust began funding visual storytellers, photographers, and multimedia artists across the country. We created a grant program specifically for artists who had been told, like I was, that their dreams were distractions. We held exhibitions, open mics, youth workshops. Every dollar was tracked. Every dollar was earned. And all of it was rooted in my grandfather's challenge. Don't become them. Use your gift. Lead with your vision. The first time I walked into a board meeting as the acting director of the Harper Creative Trust, I wore black jeans, boots, and a gray blazer with rolled-up sleeves. No pearls, no pleated anything. Some of the older trustees blinked at me like I had wandered into the wrong room. Then I handed them a 3-year strategic plan that balanced philanthropy, revenue, and impact. No one asked about my clothes again. Lucas never came back to the gallery. Not once. I heard he moved into one of the Vermont vacation homes and took up consulting. My parents stopped calling. No long texts, no guilt trips. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to chase their approval. I wasn't angry. I was clear. Some relationships are roots. Others are weights. You learn to know the difference when you finally start to grow. About 3 months after the opening, I was working late in my studio when I heard a soft knock on my door. One of the residency artists, a girl named Callie, stood holding a beat-up Canon camera. She was nervous, shifting her weight. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course." She looked down at the camera in her hands. "Do you ever worry that people only see your money now, not your work?" I smiled. "All the time," I said. "But it only matters if I believe it." She nodded slowly, like she was writing it down in her mind. "Savit, what do you lead with?" "My eye," I said. "Always. The rest follows." On the 1-year anniversary of my grandfather's passing, Mr. Whitaker arrived with one final letter, just a single page. "Wealth is not what you hold, but what you choose to build." You were always the legacy I believed in, Dana. You just had to believe it too. I sat in the middle of the gallery that night, the lights low, the walls covered in new work from residents and contributors. Outside, the city moved on like it always did. Inside, it was still. Warm, full. Later that night, I lit a candle and unlocked the front doors of the studio. It was something my grandfather used to do when he was thinking. Leave the doors open, just in case someone wandered in who needed a place to sit, to learn, or to dream. A few people drifted in. A student, a couple on vacation, a man in a security guard uniform on his way home from work. They stopped in front of the framed check exhibit, read the words, whispered to each other. They didn't know the full story. They didn't need to, because that's the thing about true legacy. It doesn't need explanation. It just needs to be lived. 2 years later, they asked me to give a commencement speech at my old art school. The request surprised me. The last time I'd stepped foot on campus, I was lugging camera gear and ramen noodles in the same duffel bag. No one knew who I was then. Now they handed me a microphone and called me a visionary. I stood behind the podium, looking out at a sea of young faces. Some tired, some defiant, all burning with the same flicker I once felt. I didn't quote philosophers or pretend I had everything figured out. I told them a story about the $10 check, about the laughter, about the letter. And I told them what it meant to be underestimated. To be underestimated is a strange kind of gift. I said, it means people don't see you coming. It means when you rise, they won't know how to stop you. They clapped. Some stood. But I wasn't there for the applause. I was there for the one kid in the back who hadn't clapped at all, but had been leaning forward the whole time, eyes locked on mine. I saw myself in that kid, and I hoped they saw a future in me. That night, I returned to the studio, alone. There was a new exhibition going up, a community collage project that stitched together dozens of stories from around the country. Grainy portraits, love letters, torn concert tickets. Proof that art didn't need to be perfect to be powerful. It just had to be true. As I walked through the gallery, I paused at one of my earliest photos. A broken window in a forgotten house. When I took that shot, I didn't know what it meant. Now I did. The window was cracked, but the light still came through. There's a secret no one tells you about legacy. It's not something you inherit. It's something you build, choice by choice, truth by truth. And sometimes all it takes to start is $10 and someone who believes in you. My grandfather didn't leave me a fortune. He left me a foundation, and I built the rest with my lens, with my heart, and with the kind of vision they never saw coming.